Do you want to make your own podcast? Spotify has a platform that lets you make one super easily, then distribute it everywhere and even earn money all in one place for free. It's called Spotify for Podcasters. And this is the platform that I use because it makes it so simple to record and distribute your podcast all in one place using your cell phone. What you need to do is download the Spotify for Podcasters app or go to www.spotify.com/podcasters to get started. Hello, my name is Catherine Moore, social worker, mom, coffee lover, and founder of Social Workers Rise, where we inspire social workers to connect, expand their knowledge, and change more lives than they ever thought possible. I'm so excited you found my podcast. We will talk everything social work on every level from micro to macro. We will hear the stories of social workers who are doing big things, learn new skills, and most importantly, give you actionable steps to make a difference today. Let's go. Hello, Amanda.
Hi, Catherine. How are you?
I'm doing great. Welcome to the Social Workers Rise podcast. I'm so excited to talk to you today. You have no idea.
Oh, that's really nice. I am honored and excited to join you.
Well, thank you so much for accepting my invitation. I have to tell you, I have looked up to you ever since I got the TDC course. I took it for my California law and ethics, and then I also took it again for my California and passed both times, first try. And I had your voice in my head thinking about how to reason and how they're going to trip me up with the question. So thank you for doing that.
It's so funny that you say that because, people don't know what I look like a lot of the time. I mean, unless they look at the picture. But I had it when I lived in LA, I had the experience of somebody in a store coming up to me and saying, "You sound so familiar." And we were trying to figure out why they knew my voice. And then I said, "Are you a therapist?" And they said, "Yeah." And I said, "Did you use Therapist Development Center?" And they said, "Yeah." And I'm like, "Yeah, that was me, Amanda." And they're like, "Oh my God, that's what it's from." So yes, people do end up knowing me or feeling me and certainly having me in their head, which I don't know if is always a good thing for people, but I hope it is.
Yeah, I could imagine it's might be a little awkward because even with me, I'm on Instagram and I have this podcast. People will just start talking to me and it feels very personal for them. And for me, it's cool because I don't, I already have that rapport built. So I wonder if it's kind of similar for you too, if you've ever had that experience.
Oh yeah, I mean, well, it's funny. We get a lot of people write in their reviews that things like I'm their best friend or their kids know me now or you know, and it's kind of weird. I just worry about people sometimes. I'm like, oh, I mean, I can't respond to everybody, but I just want to say, well, you should work on that because I'm that's just a recording. But yeah, I mean, it's certainly I never did it to have any kind of celebrity status, and it is a little weird how people, how people. I mean, I get it because I have helped people through a challenging part of their lives, but it is also part of the motivation when I moved up to Santa Barbara because there was a little bit of that stuff happening in LA, and it's weird when people give you, I don't know, you still want to be treated like a normal person, and so it's nice to just be up here and people up here. I don't talk about what I do, and so nobody knows, and I feel like I want to be careful with my influence, and I've always just been someone who has protected my privacy. I've never had been active on social media. I mean, Facebook always kind of freaked me out, and I officially quit it a few years back because I would only go on there when I was bored. And I can just say to anyone else out there that realizes that they feel bad after they go on Facebook or social media, just get off it. Because I realized I went through a really hard time after my dad died, and I was depressed, and I was starting to feel better, and I was to go on Facebook, and it just put me into this total spiral. I texted my therapist. I was like, "Oh my God, remember how I said I was feeling better? Well, I just went on Facebook and now I'm a crumpled person on the floor looking at all these other
Oh,
people's amazing lives." And it just shows it's like you can have, those situations where you um, it's easy to, to look up to people. It's easy to think that other people's lives are better than yours. And certainly I want to say to you, it's nice that, I mean, it's flattering, but I'm a person too, and I have my own struggles and my own challenges. And it's great to know that I've helped people pass, but I feel like I want to still be held, at the same level as every other person out there, just dealing with the challenges of being a parent and working jobs that, doing stuff and getting stuff done that you have to get done with, and just dealing with, COVID and old aging parents and parents that pass away and all these things that life just throws at you that everyone has to deal with. That's me too. So,
Yeah, it's so true. It's so true, Amanda. And thank you for sharing that. It is a struggle, and specifically with social media, it can be good and bad. I'm on social media too much, full disclosure. But I know that for me, I know my boundaries. And when I start to notice that I'm thinking differently, or maybe I get a thought that really isn't like me, like, oh, what do they have that I don't? Or, why can't I be as successful as them? Right. Like trying to compare ourselves, or why can't my life look as pretty as theirs? But like you said, it's a highlight reel most often, and it is good that you talk to your therapist. And I know for me, when things happen, like after the verdict happened, and then just all of the bad news happening in the world, I knew that I couldn't be on social media that day, because I couldn't see on repeat, just awful images or people who are talking bad about other people. I just couldn't do it. It doesn't mean that, you don't care. It just means that you have those boundaries there for yourself.
absolutely. No, it's true. I mean, for me, it's just uncharted territory, I think, psychologically, for the implications at the individual level and the societal level of what it means to put things that are, intended to be private, or have a context. Like if you and I have a conversation and you share your reactions about the verdict or whatnot, like I can ask questions to you. If there's something that rubs me the wrong way, I can get clarification. I'm showing up with my own experience. We can have a dialogue, and that's just absent on social media. And it's people are far more comfortable being vicious in ways that they would never, ever, 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 ever be in person. But psychologically, we still get impacted as if we are in person, and it actually even worse because it's something that's out there, public and lasting. Where, if you and I got in a debate and a discussion and I said nasty things to you, you would, you'd be able to say, well, she was really angry, she was unhinged, like she had this context. You don't know where I'm coming from when I'm on social media. And then the other thing is, then it's lasting. It's like all these people get to see this horrible thing that are said about you. I mean, I just completely avoid it because I feel like it's like I said, it's uncharted territory. And I don't think there's anyone out there that could ever argue they felt like they should have been less private. I think having like really guarding your privacy, and that includes the privacy of your own opinions on things, because opinions change. And you look at like Joe Biden and how, or any elected official, that you can look at their voting history. Voting history's always come up into play in election, and it's like, well, it's hard to look at those things out of context. At this point in time, it's like, well, they had that stance on it back then, but maybe that stance was really progressive at the time, and we don't have that context. And I think the same thing is, that's the danger in social media, and certainly with kids and young adults or anyone, that they put stuff out there. And like it said, there's serious consequences that I think far outweigh any benefits that come from it. And
Mhm.
it's just something that we don't talk about enough, because it's just so easy to get excited about it. And it's addicting to have the fall. I mean, those people up there in Silicon Valley absolutely know what they're doing. They have psychologists that work for them, that are telling people how to get addicted to their platforms, because the more data they have and the more money they can make. So it's something that people should think about and talk about. And certainly that's part of, like I said, my motivation to move to Santa Barbara and be here and just be more private, because it's something that I want to have a freedom to decide how much of myself is put out into the world. So, and
Mhm.
certainly I didn't, I mean, I knew, and I know you wanted to talk about me starting the company. That wasn't, like I said, that's like kind of it. I've never been motivated by money. I've never been motivated by like having some kind of celebrity status. It always fascinates me, like the kind of people that are in the marketplace that kind of want to promote themselves. as a name, or like, at the beginning with, why didn't I name it Amanda Rowan Seminars, like Jerry Grossman Seminars, or these other groups that name it after them. It's like, well, I never wanted it to be about me. But yeah, so that's my take on social media. Sorry if it.
No, it's all good. It's all good. What, you said you never wanted it to be about you. So what did you want it to be about? Like when you started the Therapist Development Center back in 2008, maybe even before then, maybe you had the idea before then, what were you doing it for? What's your intention or your mission?
Yeah, I was thinking about with this podcast coming up, and I kept going back farther and farther and farther into my life of saying, well, where did it actually start? If I, where did that come from, and where did that idea come from? And I think, and I've certainly done a lot of reflection on my relationship with my dad since he passed away, but like, I was born very blessed and very privileged, and I am very aware of that. And I think I don't expect other people to be, but I certainly had an awareness of, I was an only child. I mean, middle class America in Tacoma, Washington, but had two parents that were super attentive and involved in my upbringing. A mom who was really educated, certainly for that era, with a master's in nursing, and she was a school nurse and took a lot of pride in her career and really valued. My parents had very shared gender roles, and my father was a teacher and was a very good teacher in an inner city school. And it was with the kids that was mostly minority kids. It was at a school where, for parents back to school night, maybe 2 or 3 of the parents showed up of 30 per class. So it wasn't a high involved place, but I had these parents and felt very blessed. And because I felt blessed, really, I'd say mainly because of my dad, because he was very clear to me when I had good things happen, whether it be, one thing that comes to mind, I was elected student body president at my high school. And I wasn't particularly like popular in the traditional sense, but I was always just nice to everyone. And that certainly made a difference. But even after I won that, which had a lot to do with who I was as a person, my dad would see, he said to me, he's like, you were born with a 4-leaf clover in your pocket. You were really blessed. And so there was just this message all the time that I did obviously play a role in my success, but that I was blessed, and I think that when I went to Dartmouth, and I was the first person from my high school to go there, I was very much feeling like I was lucky to be there. Like I was really lucky. I felt like it was almost a fluke that I got there. And because of that, I just have always felt like a desire to give back, like an obligation, I should say, that I should give back. And it was driven by just this sense of things that are justice. And as a young kid, my mom sent me for Christmas, my mom gave me the best gift ever. She gave me my report card from preschool. And it's hilarious. And I went to this Montessori preschool, and whoever my teacher was, I mean, it describes me to a T. And this was from when I was 4. And it was like, Amanda has a very developed sense of justice, and can hold her own with adults. And she always knows the moral of the story. And, for me, with TDC, the path is interesting because it really integrated all my interests. First and foremost, which I'll loop back to later, is this kind of sense of justice. But my he was a very good teacher, and one of the things he said at a young age, the best way to learn something is to teach it. So starting in high school, I would run study groups. So I would prep for the test as if it was, like, I'll give an example, like for chemistry. We had tests on Fridays, and I would pretend the test was on Thursdays. And then I would host at my house a study group that was primarily like all the football players in my high school, which was awesome. I mean, it didn't make me very popular with the girls. At one point, one of the girlfriends was like, "What are you doing at her house?" And he's like, "I told her we're studying," and she doesn't believe me. He's like, "Can she come?" I'm like, "I don't care." So she came, and like halfway through, she's like, raised her hand, and I'm like, "Yeah." She's like, "I gonna go." That's probably why. It's like, I don't know what you're doing here, but this is legitimately just chemistry. But my parents would order pizza, and I have my one friend, Matt Stevens, we still like laugh about it because it was definitely like one of those things that that girl was a source of information to other girls of like, what is my boyfriend doing at her house on Thursday? But I loved it. It was fun. And I just tapped into this love of teaching. And then at Dartmouth, I got, actually my senior year was an intern with the dean's office, and I ended up creating a studying for the sciences program for them and their academic resources. And then I was pre-med at Dartmouth because I really didn't know what else to do. And that's kind of your law, med school, or business kind of approach. And I did the MCAT test a couple years out of school. I took some time off but I didn't, I prolonged the whole med school thing, I think partly because I wasn't exactly sure I wanted to do it. But when everybody else at Dartmouth was doing recruiting on campus and going to law school, med school, it was clear to me I didn't want to do that. I could never understand why somebody would work for someone else and make money off of, be made money. Like I was very clear with myself that nobody was going to make money off my brain. So I would be a teacher, I'd work in the nonprofit sector, but I was not going to go to work for some company and be expected to work 80 hours or 100 hours and be traveling all the time and doing all not have any, like, basically you become a slave, they say, here's your salary, but then they have your time. And I don't work that well. I kind of have an oppositional streak, which anyone who knows me would tell you, including my Pilates instructor, because she'll say, so anyway, but I got this public service fellowship from Dartmouth. This opportunity, and I applied for it, and that sent me to Central America for 6 months. And I designed my own. I designed my own project. So I went to Costa Rica for 6 months and worked in the women's prison in San Jose, in the ward where women can have their children in them if they're nonviolent offenders, and the kids they're under 4. And then also in a home for girls who were victims of incest, who had been removed from their villages to have their babies and be in this home run by the Catholic Charities down there. So it was a very stark contrast to what I had come from, certainly from the privilege that I was surrounded with at Dartmouth, and to go down into Central America and live with a host family that the home was made out of plywood and aluminum roofing, and cockroaches would come out as soon as they turned the lights off at night. So it was a very, eye-opening experience. And then to be around these women, and some of them girls, it just made the idea of having this, how privileged I was, just be so in my face. And also I for the first time, and probably only time I can think of, actually, I really had the experience of being an other, because I was in part of Costa Rica that was not at all a tourist destination, and I was the only white person around. And so that was also a really good experience. And obviously I left it. I wasn't a permanent stay, but I think it gave me a sensitivity to what it's like to be, a minority in any place, including the United States. So that really shaped me. And I feel like that privilege really, I felt like I kind of cemented this sense of an obligation of wanting to give back. And I remember having this thought of, like, I want to be a good person. That's important to me. And then I said, you know what, that's just a static state, and I said to myself, I want to be a better person. And that just makes kind of something that I feel like I really do work on. And I think like I've gotten feedback from people in a way that that's something that they feel when they're around me. So from that point, I applied to med school and got in, and then had a really great conversation with a doctor that was working at this community health clinic in DC. And she took me to lunch. She'd gone to Harvard Med School, and she said to me at lunch, "Is there anything else you could see yourself happy doing?" And I was like, "Oh yeah." And I just started making this long list of things. And after I was done, she goes, "Don't go to med school." And I said, "What?" And she's like, "Do not go to med school." And I go, "Why not?" She goes, "Med school is only for people that's the only thing they can imagine themselves doing." And she said, "It is a life sentence. And, for some people it's great, but if you think there's anything else you'd like to do, like, don't do it." She said, my husband and I met at Harvard Med School. We can't buy a house because we have over $500,000 in student loans. And
Wow.
yeah, I mean, and honestly, this is how I've always, like, my life, I've really been guided by tuition. And I kind of describe it as like gears kind of spinning, and then there'll be these times when they just click into place. And I just, right in that moment, I walked out and I called my parents and I said, "I'm not going to med school." Like, which is really insane to think about, because I was pre-med at Dartmouth and then did the MCAT, went on, a dozen interviews, got into 3 schools. I mean, that's a process of you're talking about like that being my focus for 7 years, 8
Oh
years,
my gosh.
and I was just like, "I'm not going." So, I actually had a really bad therapist that I had went to when I moved to California because it
Hello?
you turn down med school? How could you turn down med school?
Oh, sorry,
And I
you cut out right after you said, "I actually had a really bad therapist." Can you repeat that?
oh, yeah, I said I had a really bad therapist when I moved to California. Right after that, it was about a year after I turned down med school. And I told her because I got a lot of blowback from people for turning down med school. The one person that I immediately didn't get blowback from was my dad. The first thing he said was, "I never understood why you wanted to go to med school in the first place." And I was like, "Wow, yeah, why did I want to go? I don't know. It was just like of the three options, of the multiple choice options at Dartmouth, med school, law school, it was the one that was the most appealing." So, but I had this therapist. I went to the session, and my biggest thing was this struggle of I made this choice that everybody else thinks is ridiculous, and I don't know what I'm going to do instead. So I was feeling kind of lost. And I sit down and so I tell her, I go, "Yeah, I got into med school. And I turned it down." And she goes, "Why would you do that?" And I was like, "Oh my God." I was sitting there thinking, like, do I just get up now? Like, do I have to pay for this session? Like, you
Right.
clearly aren't good at basic emotional attunement. Like, this is a bad idea. Anyway, so I researched different things, and around that time when I was in Costa Rica, it also really made me realize I wanted to I felt like to make sense of the suffering that I was seeing in the world, I wanted to have some kind of framework in my spirituality and support for that. And at the time, I wasn't sure whether or not I believed in God, but I just felt like that was important, especially because all these women were very spiritual. It was really what got them through. I mean, they all prayed, they all had a relationship with God. It was just kind of a given. It's much more common in the Latino culture, to have that. Uh, and so when I was in DC after I was in Costa Rica, I did a lot of research on different religious communities and practices and went to churches and synagogues and did a lot of exploration and came to the decision that I wanted to become Jewish, mainly because it's a religion that's a set of laws, um, and it's especially in the reform movement, there's a real emphasis on healing the world and social justice, which is what
Mm,
resonated with me. So I uh, so that was going on for me in that area of my life, and then trying to figure out what I was going to do if I didn't go to med school and looking at different options and researching different programs. I looked at this program at Stanford in youth development because I really liked that kind of model and school psychology, and finally came across social work and social welfare and just was blown away that there was actually a career where it had social justice in its mission. I mean, in its vision, in its ethics.
mhm.
And so it was right around the time then that I decided to apply to med school, and I decided to convert to Judaism, um, because of that interest in social justice. And so I was at that point, I had worked at a lot of different jobs. I was usually working 2 or 3 jobs, partly for the extra money, but mainly because I just felt a calling to do it. So I have worked with pretty much every population that you could possibly work with. And it was almost like these gigs would come up or whatever. But I was also out in Washington, D.C. I was on this board of this group called HIPS, Helping Individual Prostitutes Survive. And I went out on a van and did outreach to women that were, prostitutes and down in when I was in LA, part of the needle exchange. I think I definitely was always drawn to working with populations that other people, traditional services kind of shied away from, or certainly the public did. So I think one of the things I'm really proud of is I was one of the I helped. I mean, I didn't run it, but part of my job was to be there. I was working at it was the one of the was the, at the time the only needle exchange in LA County and right off of right near Venice Beach, and giving out clean needles to people. This was like almost 20 years ago, but it just felt like really important work. So, then I got my master's in social work and decided I mean, time to take my license, and I was working at an agency where I had access to all the different test prep that was out there in the staff lounge. And so I was looking through things, and I just was knowing, oh, that was the other thing I left out. At Dartmouth, I majored in neuroscience. It was a combined major of psychology and biology. It wasn't called neuroscience at the time, but I was kind of the kind of, you can make your own major when you kind of do a hybrid of the program and two programs. And so I did a focus on learning because it was just something that I was interested in. And so I did my thesis on the state dependent learning in rats. And so that was my background. So I had that background. I also had done really well in the MCAT and so I was able to teach and did teach at Kaplan Test Prep, and they have teaching for the MCAT down to a science and really knowing how to do the strategies, and a lot of these strategies that make a huge difference in your test performance outside of even content, right? And so I had all that knowledge, and I had the experience, and I had the love of teaching, and I had all the experience in the field of social welfare with all these different populations. So then it was time for me to take this test, and I got the materials, and I ended up ordering AATBS because that was what was seemed like the most kind of professional at the time and put together. And as soon as I opened the book, I just was like, oh my God. I was like, there's no way that this is what this test could be like, because it was just all these facts
Mm.
and just so much material. And also, we're just not meant to learn with a box of books shipped to us. I mean, if
Right.
that was the case, why would we have schools at all, right? And I mean, and we're looking and seeing now with COVID, even the act of remote learning, even if it's live, has serious challenges. So
Mm-hmm.
there is something that we can't, and I'm glad we can't, because we really, as humans, are social beings that need it to be in the physical presence of others on a regular basis. There's so many things that there's so much stimulation and stuff. It's like a dog, why a dog needs to go on a walk. Like the stimulation for them of going and smelling everything and being out in nature it's what engages their brain in a meaningful way. So they can get, yeah, they exercise around the yard, but it's actually the act of going out and being like, oh, this smells different. This smells different. It's like the same thing with people. Like we need in the physical presence of other people. So um, I was looking at material and I'm just like, wow. And at the time too, I mean, the test that they were charging for what I ordered, I want to say I paid like 750, and Grossman was charging up in that same, they were charging a lot. There was a monopoly. I mean, it was just, there was a couple different companies, but they at all, the prices were really high. Well, I was looking at this stuff and I was thinking to myself, oh my God, I could do this better. And around that time, my coworker had given me this book, The 4 Hour Work Week, which is all about kind of creating passive income. And he's funny. That guy's made a lot of money off of selling the idea of the 4 Hour Work Week, which is funny because he basically did exactly what he said in the book, but about doing it. So I love when things are like meta like that. So
Right.
anyway, I read like 4 chapters of it and I was like, oh, I get the idea. And it was right around the time that I was studying for the test. And then I thought to myself, oh my God, I could do this better. And I went across the hall to my friend who was the social worker intern director, Sharon, and I said, "You want to start a test prep company with me?" I'm like, "I can totally do this. Like, this is like." And she taught, we talked about it for a while, and she's like, "Yeah, I'm interested." Well, it's funny with her because I tried to get her to do it with me 3 times, and she turned me down. I said yes at first, and then turned me down. Yes, turned me down. Yes, turned me down, and then I gave up. And I'm so glad, and she is too. I mean, I think she regrets because she thinks, obviously there could have been some benefit, but it was something that ultimately I just had to do by myself and just be my own
Mm.
boss, even though I prefer to do things. And I think I was also just kind of scared and didn't think I could do it by myself.
Mm.
Ultimately, I built a team of people that helped me, and I couldn't have done it without them. And I recently just, some of them that are still with me, when we're org changes, and I told 3 of them, I'm like, I'm listing you. You guys are officially co-founders at this point because we've had to redo the program a couple times, and they have made major contributions to making it better, and I want them to be acknowledged for that. So, but I'll have to say, a driving force in me doing the company was I actually took the test. And as soon as I took the test, I realized not only could I do it better, but the materials that were out there were just way off. Like they were
Mm.
just not what was on the test. And it became more evident because I did AATBS for the second, and this is back when the clinical vignette existed. And that was a tricky test. I mean, there was no other test like it. It was multiple choice with each answer having multiple components. You didn't have to go through this, but each answer had multiple components in it, and some of the components overlapped. So you really, really had to have a strategy on how to score each answer, first of all. So which has nothing to do with being a therapist, right? I
Right.
mean, how to take a test does not have to do with therapist. But on top of it, you just had to have real clarity about what the question was asking. And the test preps that were out there so I did AATBS, and I'm a good test taker. Like I said, I did well in the MCAT. I taught this stuff. I knew about the learning, and I was doing AATBS stuff, and I was like, this stuff doesn't make sense to me. Like there was answers that I'd get wrong, and I'd even contact them, and they'd say, oh, well, the test is tricky, and we're just trying to trick you so that you get
Oh my
used to being
God.
tricked on the test. That was their answer. And I was like, that's not a good answer, because basically you're telling someone to bet against themselves, right? If I say to you, you're going to have an interview and just be yourself. They just want to hear exactly what they want to get to know you, and they want to know how you are in the world. Like you're going to go in there like, yeah, like I can do this. If I say to you, no, Catherine, they're going to, every question they ask is going to be a trick question.
Oh my gosh.
Right? Like what do you immediately do? Like you immediately freeze. You're like, oh my God, they're trying to trick me. And that's what AATBS was telling me. And so I went and I bombed it. But what was interesting, and as soon as I sat down to take it, I was like, this is nothing like my test that I took. And my brain remembers things, and actually tests. I don't have a photographic memory, but um, I mean, I could, if after that test I came out and I could write down immediately 90% of the test, because
Mhm.
that's how my mind studies things and makes it. So anyway, I was very clear. But what was interesting is the area that I bombed was the law and ethics, and I had gotten 100 on the AATBS. I had figured out what AATBS wanted for the law and ethics, but here I had gotten. So can you imagine me failing a test? I mean, I'm somebody who did always rocked tests, rocked
Right.
them, like helped my friends through Dartmouth who are in med school today, like, are med who are doctors now, like help them on their tests because I ran study groups like I did in high school there. So I was devastated, and I was also shocked, but I was also like something's not adding up. And then when I was thinking, well, I got 100 on AATBS's law and ethics, and then I said, but so obviously to me was wrong because I was deficient in that area. And then I looked at the other companies' materials that were out there, and none of them was like what I saw. I mean, I had them pretty like the next day or the next couple of days, and so I was like, none of these people are teaching what these tests are like. And I
Mhm.
ended up doing a deep dive into the BBS website, and I can't even remember how I found it, but on some random page way buried as I clicked through things, I found an old study guide that they had that had practice questions. It had 8 or 9 practice questions for each test, the clinical and the clinical vignette and the other standard. It was called the standard written and the clinical vignette. So there I had 8 questions. None of them had rationales. It just had the answer key. And I sat down and I took it. It was 2 different vignettes, and I took it, and I got half of them wrong. I got the
Oh
same
wow.
score. And so I sat there and I go, well, this is interesting. And so then I said, because all tests have logic to them, I said, well, what would my thinking have to be in order to get the right answer? And so I decoded each question. What would I have? How would I have to think to get the answer they wanted? And then as soon as I did that, it clicked. And none of the other tests were. I mean, all the other stuff out there wasn't consistent. I mean, it's hard to write good questions.
Mhm.
And I worked for Jerry Grossman for a while, and I can tell you, like our questions when we put them on a test, there's a process that we go through. One person writes them. Another person takes the test blind and sees how they do, and then if they get them anything wrong or right, they have a conversation with whoever wrote it. If they got it wrong, then they tweak it to say, what is it exactly? How would I get this right? Was it the person taking it error, or what does that we do we need to take it? If they got things right, we'd say, well, is there anything we could do to make it a little bit harder? And after that second person does it and they change it, then a third person takes it. Um, second person who takes it, but the third person involved. And then there's a final round where I'll take it. I'll take the questions that they've written and make sure that we can. So then we can stand by it. Also, when you're writing a test question, you have a goal in mind of what concept you're testing, but that doesn't necessarily come through with what the final question is, and you wouldn't know that unless. And that's why that's exactly why the test runs practice questions, is because they get feedback on what people get right and wrong. So um, we really, I took those sample questions, and then I was able to, once I knew the logic behind them, I was able to make more practice questions that followed that logic. And when I went and took the test second time, I just knew right away that I was acing it. Like every single question, I was like, yep, there's the answer, there's the answer, there's the answer. So this tapped my social justice streak. I then became completely outraged, not loudly, but maybe loudly, actually probably loudly up, because at the time too, well, this is funny. So I was like, this is wrong. Like, these companies are selling $700, $800 test prep programs that don't work, that actually can make you fail. And then when people fail, they take it on. They're the failure. They don't think that maybe they were sold the wrong stuff, right? And then these companies too actually charge people to reuse their program, which is just even more troubling because they're the ones
Mhm.
selling it to you in the first place. So that was one of the things. I was like, well, when I sell my prep, like, people are going to get to use it till they pass. I'm not going to ever charge people to use it again. Otherwise, I actually have an incentive to have them fail, right? So I just put together materials, and I actually ended up going first to work for Jerry Grossman because I wanted experience under my belt and get some legitimacy. And he was in the process of creating the social work program in his company, and he was mainly doing MFTs, and he was interested in me helping him do that. And I said to him, well, you can cut out like a third of what you're just putting in the MFT program because it's not on the test. And he said, well, I don't want to do that because we'd have to charge less. So it was very clear with
Mhm.
all the companies, a lot of the material that they were selling wasn't on the test, because the test is a reasoning based test. So it really is about staying present with what they're giving, which is similar actually to the MCAT. So when I took the med school exam, one of the categories on the test is physics. I hadn't actually taken physics yet when I did the MCAT, because the MCAT, and I was fine, and I did really well on that section because it's very conceptual physics that's on there, and it really is more the strategies of the test. And you don't have to have gone through a full year of physics to do well, because they're not asking the level of details that you would get in a physics course. It's more the concepts. And so that was one of the things with Kaplan that I took away with was the actual content that people need to know, this baseline content isn't that much. You do need to know it, sure, but then you just need to know how to apply it and when to use it and when to like the actual strategies of in clinical strategies, clinical way of thinking. So that's what prompted me really, when drove me, was like, this is wrong. Like, this is wrong that these companies are selling those materials, and I'm going to do something about it. And that's what I did. And so I started off with small groups, and I created 3 2-hour workshops. So it was just 6 hours. And so it was primarily strategies for both tests. And I had my top 50 topics that I taught for the standard written, and taught the strategies. And then I had a few vignettes for the second the clinical vignette, and 6 hour. And it was so I didn't have any practice tests. It was just strategies and the core overview of content at the pretty stripped down level, if you think it's only 6 hours. But what happened is I would get people in those courses that had failed multiple times. I mean, I was not a big name, so these people were not going to come to me first. So most
Mhm.
of the people that used me in the beginning were people who had failed multiple times using all the other test prep companies, and they were completely desperate. But the
Mhm.
beauty in those people is that when they come to me and then they pass, I mean, that's why it got fast, was because these people were like walking testimonials of my company, because they were like, whoa, it wasn't me. I was taught the wrong way.
Right.
And I remember, so then I was also very committed to the, I hadn't taken the MFT program, and I didn't feel like you should be teaching that test if you weren't exposed to it yourself. So, but I had this colleague that had failed the MFT clinical. Well, so the standard written I felt fine about because there was just so much overlap. But the clinical vignette I knew was a little bit different, but I wasn't sure how. It was much heavier on theories for the MFT. But I had this good friend who was at my agency, and she had taken it like 3 times and failed the clinical vignette for her MFT 3 times. Very bright woman, very great, really great clinician. And her job was on the line, which can happen to people. And I said to her, and she's like, could I do your course? I'm not going to charge you for it because I don't feel right. And I want your feedback. That's, what I want you to give me. Sure. And after the very first class, she said, I know exactly why I failed now. Like, I wasn't, and so she took her test and did my strategies, and she passed. And I said to her, do you think it's okay if I teach the MTs? And she goes, you have to, Amanda. So I remember at this point, built up enough of a reputation from the social work community that I was already getting some referrals. And I had the very first workshop for MFTs. I had 15 people in it, and they had all failed multiple times. And a lot of these people were older, in their careers. Like, this is like a devastating a devastating event in their life, a very significant one. I mean, most people who are in this field, they've done well academically, they've been put it together, they've done, had success and just questioning their overall abilities. It's really, really hard. I say for all those, that's you. I think it's a great opportunity to have that experience because we see clients all the time that are dealing with failures and setbacks and these things that's part of life when you're actually pushing yourself to grow if you are pushing yourself to grow and achieve, you're going to have setbacks. And that's part of the resilience and ability to get around that and keep a perspective is important. So anyway, going back to the story, I had these 15 people in there and they'd all fail. Here I was teaching them the curriculum and right away they were all just saying they felt like they all felt confident with right away what I was giving them was going to help. And they all passed.
Wow.
All passed. Yep.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And so then they went out and I mean, it was like, then it really started to grow quickly. And I had always, I think at some point we started having people call in on the phone, and then I was starting to record the lectures and make those available for people to listen to for a short, afterwards if they'd taken the course but they wanted to re-listen. Just sat down and I was hiking actually, and I just felt like I channeled the whole vision of the website as it really looks today. I mean, we're going to be doing a revamp of it, but the actual exactly how the website looks, I completely channeled on a hike in Topanga Canyon in LA, and just saw all the steps and everything. Like it was a moment of just complete integration between everything in my life that I'd done before and this people. And going back to my outreach, what's really funny is when I first did the lectures, I would always comment, I'd say, well, if you did eight, because most that came to my test prep had already failed using other companies, and I always wanted to cheer them up and make them feel like it was them. So I'm like, well, if you did this company, they would have taught this, and you have to ignore that. Because we would also get people that would call us and be like, well, they say to do this. I'm like, no, just if you're going to do our prep, just do our prep. Like we're not going to get in an argument about what Jerry Grossman says or AATBS says. Like, this is how we say to do it. And all my tests, all my coaches have gotten 90% or higher. Like that's how Kaplan does it. Percentage, it could be in the 90th percentile to teach. I was like, we know the test. You can argue what you want, but this is how we're telling you to do it. And anyway, but what's funny is I would say these things like, this test probably will do this, and this isn't right, and but we got to this point where people were just coming to us without doing those companies first, right? They had just come directly to us. So we started getting feedback. They were like, Amanda sounds really angry at this such and such company, or Amanda keeps talking about this other company. And they had no idea. They had no point of reference why that was relevant. The people that had appreciated it, but when we re-recorded or when we had to, because the test changed, that I was like, yeah, I don't need to like bring my outrage anymore into this stuff. So yeah, so that got us to where we were with, how the kind of birth of the company. Oh, sorry, my earplugs coming out. Hold on. Oh, are you there?
Yes.
Hold on. Okay, I'm taking you out of my everything. So, but yeah, I feel like I have to acknowledge Bethany Vanderbilt because she was my first hire. She was amazing, and we were both new moms. And when I came up with the plan to do it, so she used my stuff to pass and gave me feedback on it. And then when she actually moved from like to South Carolina or something and didn't have a job and was a new mom, and anyone who's done that knows how hard that is, and the actually reality check of what it's like to be a mom and trying to work and trying to do a job, it's pretty absurd. How hard it is to try to balance that life. And so she was able to work, I want to say like 15 hours a week. And I had at that point 2 kids and was young. I mean, a baby and a toddler, and had childcare 3 days a week. And so between us, we had the equivalent of one full-time person. And I just mapped out the whole thing we had to build out. And I was like, okay, it's going to take us a year. That's how long it's going to take us. And we just did it. And we built out the initial program. And then when we expanded, I added Asia and Robin, who are my coaches. They're the MFT coaches. And so they came
they were studying when it was just the 6-hour thing, and both they were actually happened to be friends, and they in another both reached out to me saying, I love your company, and if you grow, I'd love to be part of it. And then it was funny. I was like, well, God, which one am I going to pick? Because they both seem so great. And then I was like, you know what? They used to work at the same agency together, and they live near each other. And I thought, you know what? It's nice if I hire both of them part-time, and then they have each other, and we have that, because I knew also writing questions, how important it is to have more than one set of eyes, or as many as you can. So they came on and were really instrumental in building out the MFT program. And then the last person, or two other people, Emily Pellegrino, it's my brother-in-law's little sister, and she's so awesome. Like she had just happened to graduate from social work school out in Chicago, and she's like a workhorse, but like a racehorse workhorse. Like this girl can get stuffed like she's so fast at everything. And I used to like laugh with Bethany because I'm like, nobody tell Emily she's getting paid by the hour, okay? Because she does things at like 3 times the rate as anyone else. And I'm like, dude, if you slow down, you'd make twice as much money at least. And it was really cute because I obviously know her parents because they're kind of part of my extended family. And I remember talking to the dad about it. And I'm like, I don't know what you did with that one, but she's a workhorse. And he goes, oh, she used to always be like that. He's like, she would garden with me for hours. And so it's just funny to think of like my preschool report card, how some of this stuff. But she has been one of those kind of quiet contributors that knows the ins and outs of I feel like if something happened to me, my will needs to be make sure you talk to Emily, because Emily knows exactly how everything at the company works on the back end of the computer, because she just, it's like if I need to find a file, even if it's not related to Emily, even if it's not related to my company, my first instinct is to ask Emily. It's like if I can't find something at home, I should ask Emily, because Emily always knows where it is. So Emily Pellegrino has been just absolutely phenomenal, and just so good and patient with customers. And then the other person is that's been such a gift is this woman, Heidi Toby, who was actually, at some point we were giving out, a couple of years in a row, we gave out some scholarships to social work students. That was a really neat program that we are hoping to bring back. But and then she was so funny because she was studying for her test and contacted me, and had taken a live workshop that was at her school from this Dr. D, or some woman that goes around and does these workshops. And this woman has never taken the test, by the way, and she was licensed before it ever came out. So it rubs me the wrong way when I use the analogy of, if this was a test that you had to ride a motorcycle over a mountain, would you ever consider hiring someone that's never ridden a motorcycle to teach you how to do it? It's like, no way. It's like, well, I've studied motorcycles. I'm like, no, have you actually gotten on a motorcycle yourself and rode over the mountain? Well, no, but I have a PhD in the history of motorcycles. It's like, no, I like to talk to someone that's actually ridden a motorcycle. Well, anyway, right. Heidi's so funny because she calls me up and I go, well, she goes, do you just have tests? I just want the tests. I don't want to do a whole program. And I'm like, well, no, our program is a system and you can't break it apart, because it really is I know what I'm doing. It's all based on the neuroscience. And she's just like, nah, I'm not interested. She was just it's really funny to think that she works for me now, and she's such a great contributor, but we laugh about it. And so then I said, look, I already did this workshop. I'm going to take the test in a week. I don't need a whole program. And she's very bright, and she was right. She probably didn't. But I said to her, look, I'm really curious, because she was taking the master's level program that we were just getting launched. And I said, I want you to take the test, take our program for free, and just give us feedback. And also I said, I'm really curious about how it compares to this other person's materials, because this one lady was a bigger one of our competitors for the national program. And so that's what she did. And she just gave such great feedback. And it was, clearly she said it was so much better than the other women's. And she did really well on the test. And she was definitely could say that she felt like she would have passed anyway, but our prep just pushed her over the edge as far as, getting a really high score. So I just liked her because she was so authentic and clearly really bright. And so then I said to her, we're going to be doing, expanding to the LMSW, and would you be interested in coming and doing that? And she's like, yeah, maybe, she just was. I liked it because she just wasn't, I don't know. She has the confidence and stuff and an honesty that I appreciate. So then when it came around time, I reached out to her. I don't know, it was like 4 months or 5 months away from that point, and reached out to her, and she was interested and came on initially part-time, and that program grew. And at some point I just said to her, well, I don't think she was kind of getting burned out where she was working. And I knew that. And I said, well, how much what are you making there? And how much would we need to bring you on with the intention of growing the program? And so we made that work, and she came on early on. I mean, I don't know how many years that had been. And then she's been very instrumental in the social work program. So, all of these people, they are the engine really of the company. And I'm well aware of that at this point. I mean, I was been busy raising my children and blessed to have the time to do that. So it's only really recently in the last few months where we're kind of at this point turning the corner and deciding I'm going to get more involved. My kids are old enough now that I can feel more comfortable being away. It was too important to me to be around my kids. I couldn't feel like I could justify, certainly because it felt like it was more about the money. But this new thing where we are now is we're going to be launching a CEU library, and bringing that kind of, I've done a lot of training. So I've done a lot of training. I've done a lot of reading. I've done a lot of studying since I've been up in Santa Barbara and kind of out of the mix. And I really feel committed to bringing a similar quality of CEU into the therapist community as I did with the stuff with the Therapist Development Center test prep.
Yes, I love that, Amanda. And we're going to end this episode for this week, and we're going to do a second episode.
Yay!
I'm enjoying this conversation so much that next week I really want to hear about what you have coming next, of course, for the CEUs, but I also want to hear about if you've ever experienced any kind of imposter syndrome, or how you got, built up confidence, or maybe some confidence tips that you can share with us. And that is going to be coming in the next episode.
Awesome. That sounds great. Yes,
yeah.
I have had imposter syndrome for sure.
Thank you so much for listening to another episode of Social Workers Rise. If this episode helped you, please help me spread the word by leaving a review wherever you listen to your podcast, and share that you're listening. Tag me on social media. I love it. I will repost and reshare. I love it. Social currency is free, but it is so valuable. Also, I'd love to hear from you on Instagram. I really do respond. I really do love it when you give me your feedback. Lastly, this is not therapeutic advice or business advice or any other kind of personalized advice. To get that, you definitely need me as your coach. So please, again, reach out to me on Instagram. I can't wait till next week. I will see you then. All the love. Bye.